There is a house in Norfolk where the light comes off the North Sea in winter, so flat and cold that you can see the shadow of a rook against a December sky from a mile away, and where on a grey morning in late January, the brick gables of the east front rise above 1,000 acres of flat parkland as though they have been there forever. They have not. Nothing at Sandringham is as old as it pretends to be. Sandringham House covers 7 acres of roofs. It contains 270 rooms, 300 acres of formal gardens, and sits at the centre of an estate of 20,000 acres of farmland and forest and salt marsh, reaching from the Wash coast inland to the edge of the fen. More than 100,000 visitors pass through its grounds every year. 3 kings have died inside its walls. And on a December afternoon, when the mist comes up off the saltings, the house seems to recede from the path in front of you. Pale red brick against a paler red sky. They walk the ballroom. They pause in the saloon beneath a marble bust of Queen Victoria. They photograph the royal garage, the state stables, the Jutland bronzes outside the church. They buy hot chocolate in the gift shop, and almost none of them ask the question that the house itself seems to insist upon. Why here? Not a castle, not a palace, not an ancient seat of the crown. Sandringham was a house bought off the market on a whim by a 20-year-old Prince of Wales who wanted somewhere to hide from his mother. It was rebuilt in red brick because red brick was fashionable. It was extended to hold the weekend parties of a prince whose mistresses have their own chapter in English social history. It has been the quiet scene of more royal tragedies than any comparable building in the country. 3 kings have died in its rooms. A 14-year-old prince was hidden on its estate for most of his short life. An entire company of Norfolk soldiers, recruited from its farms, vanished on a Turkish hillside in 1915 and was never found. And one Christmas, a princess who was about to become the most famous woman in the world asked to leave early and was told she could not. Sandringham is one of the most photographed private houses in Britain. It has been the backdrop of every royal Christmas on television for nearly a century. It has welcomed kings and queens and prime ministers and American presidents and the annual procession of the royal family in their Sunday best, walking to St. Mary Magdalene Church on Christmas morning. It is also one of the saddest houses in Britain, because behind the red brick and the Christmas bulletins and the neat rows of pheasants on the shoot day scorecards lies a history of concealment, of illnesses hidden, of lovers hidden, of heirs hidden, of children hidden, of a battalion hidden in the official record for 3 decades, and of a king's death on a cold January night that was hastened by a physician's injection delivered in his own written words so that the news would be announced in the morning papers rather than the evening journals. Sandringham is where the House of Windsor goes to break. If you find these deep investigations into Britain's great houses and the hidden lives within them worth your time, please subscribe to this channel, leave a comment telling me which estate we should explore next, and help these stories reach the audience they deserve. It begins with a mother and a son. By the autumn of 1861, Queen Victoria had decided that her eldest son was a disaster. Albert Edward, Prince of Wales, Bertie to his family and Edward to history, was 19, plump, slow with his book, and, in the Queen's exasperated view, morally incurable. That summer, he had been caught by his tutor in a camp bed at the Curragh Army Barracks near Dublin with an Irish actress named Nellie Clifton, who had been smuggled into the prince's quarters by the officers of his regiment as a birthday present, the Queen was told. The prince consort, Albert, was told. Albert travelled to Cambridge through a cold November rain to confront his son, caught a chill on the return journey, and within 3 weeks was dead. Victoria blamed Bertie for her husband's death. She would blame him for it, explicitly and in writing, for the rest of her life. The Queen withdrew to Osborne, to Balmoral, to the long black retreat of her widowhood, and she did something that was, by the standards of English constitutional history, extraordinary. She refused to give her heir anything to do. No state papers, no functions, no access to cabinet. Bertie was allowed to marry. In March 1863, he married Princess Alexandra of Denmark, but he was not allowed to govern. And a prince of his age and appetite, with nothing to govern, will govern something else. He will govern his own pleasures. What he needed was a house He needed a house far enough from London that the morning papers could not follow him. He needed a house large enough for house parties of 60 guests. He needed a house with shooting, because shooting in late Victorian England was the theatre in which young men of leisure performed their idleness as virtue. And he needed a house that was, above everything else, his. Not Victoria's, not the Crown's, not tied up in any lease or trust that could be revoked by a letter from Osborne. In the spring of 1862, his equerry, Colonel Charles Phipps, brought him particulars of an estate in Norfolk. Sandringham Hall and its 7,000 acres had been the property of the Honourable Charles Spencer Cowper, stepson of Lord Palmerston, who had bankrupted himself on continental gambling and was selling to settle debts. The house was a plain Georgian box of white stucco with undistinguished gardens, flat park and coastal light. It stood 6 miles from the nearest railway at Wolferton. It faced north. It was, by the standards of great English houses, not grand. It was also available. Bertie paid £220,000, the rough equivalent of £26 million today, from the capital of the Duchy of Cornwall, which he had come into at the age of 18. He took possession in February 1863. He was 21 years old. Alexandra hated it. The house was cold, the gardens were waterlogged, the new wife of a new prince had been brought to a county she did not know to live in a building nobody would have admired. She said so, in letters. She was told to adjust. Within 3 years, Bertie had commissioned a demolition. Between 1867 and 1870, the white Georgian Sandringham was pulled to the ground and replaced. The new architect was A.J. Humbert, a man of no distinction, whose only other royal commission had been the Albert Memorial Chapel at Windsor, and the new house was built in a style that would come to be called Jacobean. Red brick with white stone dressings, mock Tudor gables, turrets, carved barge boards, a 17-bay entrance front. It was enormous. It was aggressively modern for 1870 and would look, within a generation, quaintly out of date. It was also, for the prince, entirely his. He filled it. The staterooms were finished in dark oak and Spanish leather. The ballroom, added in 1883 when the original house was already too small for his parties, was big enough for 500. The saloon became a corridor of royal photographs, signed portraits from every court in Europe, hunting trophies, porcelain, and weapons. Alexandra was given her sitting room and her rose garden. The rest was Bertie's, and into Bertie's rooms, year after year, came the Marlborough House Set. The name was a joke, and it stuck. Marlborough House in London was the prince's town residence. The set were his friends, a floating circle of between 20 and 50 aristocrats, bankers, actresses, American heiresses, soldiers, diplomats, and mistresses who formed his private court when the Queen's Court would not have them. They were, in their own rooms, enormously entertaining. They were, in Victoria's judgment, the reason her son would never be trusted with the throne until she was dead. They came to Sandringham for the shooting. They stayed for the weekends, and they turned a provincial Norfolk house into the most talked about private address in England. The shooting was the point. The house was arranged around it. Bertie kept clocks at Sandringham that ran half an hour fast. This was not an affectation. It was a management system. Sandringham time. The half-hour lead was instituted by the new Prince of Wales in the 1860s, officially to extend the hours of winter shooting, and it ran on every clock in the house, the stables, the church, and the estate offices until 1936. The servants rose at 5 a.m. by Sandringham time, which was 4:30 by Greenwich. The first shooting brigade assembled at 9 a.m. by Sandringham time, which was 8:30 by London. It was a way of imposing discipline on a house of guests who otherwise kept aristocratic hours. And it was a way of telling the world, quietly, every day, that Sandringham ran on its own clock. The shoot was the social technology of the place. Bertie had the estate restocked with pheasants on a scale that had never been attempted in Britain. By 1891, Sandringham was rearing more than 30,000 pheasants a year for the guns, a figure so large that it required an army of gamekeepers, feed boys, stockmen, and beaters drawn from every village on the estate and from outside labour hired in for the shooting season. The bags were astonishing. A single day at Sandringham might record 3,000 pheasants, 600 partridges, 200 hares. The record day, in 1913, recorded a combined bag close to 7,000 birds. The point was not sport. The point was display. A prince demonstrating to every other crowned head in Europe that he could afford to kill birds on a scale that made the continental royal shoots look amateur. And inside the house, in the long winter evenings after the shoots, he demonstrated something else. Lily Langtry came first. She was the wife of an Irish landowner, a famous beauty, and Bertie's first publicly acknowledged mistress. She was at Sandringham repeatedly between 1877 and 1880. Alexandra, who was by this point almost entirely deaf and increasingly lamed by a severe childbirth illness, was expected to receive her. She did. The discipline of the English court in the long reign of Victoria was that the wife greets the mistress in the drawing room and nobody speaks of it. Alexandra kept the discipline. Langtry was followed by Daisy, Countess of Warwick. Daisy arrived on the scene in 1889. She was richer than Lily, cleverer, more dangerous, and a committed social reformer who would later convert to socialism and stand for Parliament as a Labour candidate. She was at Sandringham constantly for nearly a decade. Bertie wrote her letters every day when they were apart. When the affair ended in 1898, she threatened to publish them. Bertie paid, or his secretary paid, to retrieve them. The payment has never been exactly documented. It was, by every estimate, enormous. And then came Alice. Alice Keppel was the wife of the Honourable George Keppel, younger son of the Earl of Albemarle. She was 29 when she became Bertie's last great mistress in 1898. She was beautiful, witty, utterly discreet, and almost universally liked by the court. Alexandra received her. Alexandra wrote her notes. On Bertie's deathbed in 1910, Alexandra would send for Alice so that she could say goodbye, a gesture so radical for a Victorian queen that it still startles biographers. Alice Keppel's great-granddaughter, Camilla Parker Bowles, would marry Bertie's great-great-grandson Charles in 2005. The continuity is almost a joke. History at Sandringham is circular, but the point of Alice, and the point of Daisy, and the point of Lily was that Sandringham was where it happened. The London affairs were conducted in London. The weekend tours were at country houses, but the mistresses came to Sandringham because Sandringham was Bertie's. It was the one house in England where he was not somebody else's son, and not somebody else's heir, and not somebody else's prince, but the master of his own building, and the building absorbed them all. On 9th November 1871, in the upstairs bedroom of the new Sandringham, Bertie very nearly died. He had contracted typhoid, almost certainly from a defective drain at Lord Londesborough's nearby house party. For 3 weeks he lingered. Victoria was summoned. Alexandra kept vigil. On the 14th of December, the 10th anniversary of Prince Albert's death from the same disease, the Prince of Wales rallied, and to the astonishment of his doctors began to recover. Victoria, who had been preparing for her son's funeral, wrote in her journal that it was as though Albert had returned to save him. England broke out in a national celebration of Thanksgiving. A hymn was written for the occasion. The prince, having nearly died, went back to his mistresses. 3 things happened at Sandringham during the long Edwardian years, and Edwardian is used here in the personal sense, because even when Bertie acceded to the throne in 1901 and became Edward VII, he continued to live as he had lived at Sandringham as a prince. He collected weapons, he rearranged the gardens, he accepted gifts of jewels and gold plate from visiting German princes. He ran his railway carriage to London twice a week and back. He overate on an heroic scale. He shot, he loved, and he aged badly. In the spring of 1910, he returned from Biarritz with bronchitis. He came to London. He did not come to Sandringham. On 6th May 1910, at Buckingham Palace, Edward VII died. Alexandra had him brought home. He was buried at Windsor. But the house he had built was orphaned, and the house he had built would very soon, in the hands of his second son, become a house of a different kind of darkness. George V was nothing like his father. He was worse for the building. George Frederick Ernest Albert, Duke of York, had not been raised to be king. His elder brother, Eddie, Prince Albert Victor, Duke of Clarence, was the heir. Eddie died of influenza at Sandringham in January 1892, aged 28. George, who was 2 years younger, inherited both the succession and, in a decision his grandmother would have recognised as purely Victorian, his dead brother's fiancée, Princess Mary of Teck, had been engaged to Eddie for 6 weeks. She married George in July 1893. They had 6 children. They lived at York Cottage on the Sandringham estate, a 10-bedroom lodge near the kitchen gardens, cramped, dark, and entirely unsuitable for the future King and Queen of England. George insisted on staying there. He was that kind of man. The 5th child was John. Prince John Charles Francis was born at York Cottage on July 12, 1905. He was a cheerful child, large for his age, affectionate, and, from about the age of 4, prone to seizures. The family called them fits. Contemporary doctors called them epilepsy. The seizures grew worse as John grew older. By 1909, he was also developing what would today be diagnosed as an autism spectrum condition. By 1911, his appearance at state functions had become unpredictable. He might laugh loudly in the middle of a silence, or speak out of turn, or sit down on the floor of a stateroom, and the palace made a quiet, unilateral decision. John was removed. From 1912, the youngest son of the king was moved out of the family's homes and installed at Wood Farm, a working farmhouse at the northwest edge of the Sandringham estate, approximately 2 miles from the main house. He was given a nurse, Charlotte Bill, known as Lala, who had been his nursery nurse since birth and who adored him, and a small household of servants. His parents visited occasionally. His siblings visited rarely. His mother, Queen Mary, wrote sadly in letters that John's visits to the big house had become impossible because of his seizures and his behaviour, and that he was happier at Wood Farm. He may or may not have been. He died there on the 18th of January 1919, aged 13, after a particularly severe seizure in his sleep. The cause of death was recorded as status epilepticus. He was buried in the churchyard of St. Mary Magdalene at Sandringham, in a small grave that visitors can still see. The Times printed a brief announcement. The King's diary recorded that the little boy had been practically unconscious for some hours before dying, and that it was the greatest mercy possible. Queen Mary wrote to her confidante that it was the first great sorrow in my life. Neither of them attended the funeral in a public capacity. There was no lying in state. There was no black bunting in London. John's death was not a constitutional event. It was a private family grief, managed by a family that had become expert at privacy. The boy spent 7 of his 13 years hidden on the estate, where his grandfather's mistresses had come and gone for 4 decades. Sandringham had absorbed him, as it absorbed everything. The second death at Sandringham was more calculated. By the winter of 1935 to 1936, George V was dying of bronchitis and heart disease. He had been ill for most of the year. The Christmas broadcast he had delivered from Sandringham, the radio broadcast he had first given in 1932, and which would become an institution, was, in December 1935, distressingly weak. His doctors brought him home to Norfolk to die. The royal physician-in-chief was Bertrand Dawson, 1st Viscount Dawson of Penn. Dawson was the most famous doctor in England, physician to 4 monarchs, a man with a peerage and a reputation for ruthless clinical judgment. On the night of the 20th of January 1936, Dawson sat by the King's bedside in the bedroom on the 1st floor of Sandringham. The King was unconscious. His breathing was laboured. It was, by every medical estimate, a matter of hours. Dawson made a phone call. He called his own wife in London and instructed her to telephone the Times and warn them to hold the first edition. He then wrote, on a sheet of prescription paper, the bulletin that would become one of the most famous sentences in 20th century British journalism. The King's life is moving peacefully towards its close. And then, at 11 o'clock on the night of January 20th, 1936, in the 1st floor bedroom of Sandringham House, Bertrand Dawson, by his own written admission in a private note not made public until 1986, administered to the unconscious king an injection of 3/4 of a gram of morphine and 1 gram of cocaine. He did this, he wrote, for 2 reasons. The first was to shorten the king's suffering. The second, and this is the sentence that scandalized Britain half a century later when it was published, was to ensure that the death was announced in the morning papers rather than the less appropriate evening journals. George V died at 11:55 p.m. Dawson's timing worked. The announcement was carried by the Times and the BBC first thing on January 21st, 1936. Dawson's bulletin entered the English language. What Dawson had done was, by any modern standard, unlawful euthanasia. The injection was fatal. It was administered without the patient's consent and without the family's knowledge. When Dawson's notes were posthumously published in 1986, there was a minor national scandal. By then, Dawson had been dead for 41 years. Sandringham stayed exactly as it was. There was one more king waiting. George VI came to the throne unexpectedly, as his father had in the constitutional emergency of the abdication crisis of December 1936. His elder brother, Edward VIII, David to the family, had refused to give up the twice-divorced Wallis Simpson, and the throne had passed in the space of 325 days from the father who died at Sandringham to the second son, who would also, in the end, die at Sandringham. Before he did, something happened on the Sandringham estate that, if you walk quietly around the churchyard of St Mary Magdalene on a grey afternoon, you can still see recorded in stone. On the north wall of the church is a bronze plaque. It commemorates the men of the 5th Territorial Battalion of the Royal Norfolk Regiment, the Sandringham Company, who served in the First World War. The names run in careful rows. The dates beside them cluster around a single afternoon: August 12th, 1915. Gallipoli, Suvla Bay. The Sandringham Company was unique in the British Army. It had been raised in 1908 from the male workforce of the Sandringham estate: gamekeepers, stockmen, gardeners, grooms, estate carpenters, clerks, and footmen, at the personal instruction of Edward VII, who wanted a territorial battalion drawn from his own men. The commanding officer was Frank Beck, the estate land agent. His lieutenants included his nephew and his son-in-law. When the battalion was mobilised in August 1914, every man in it had either worked on the royal estate or was the son of a man who had. They were, in the phrase of a contemporary memoir, the Sandringhams. They landed at Suvla Bay on August 10th, 1915, as part of the 5th Norfolk. On the afternoon of August 12th, ordered into an advance through a wooded valley under Turkish machine gun fire, the Sandringham Company, some 250 men under Captain Beck, disappeared. The standard military histories describe what followed. The company advanced. The smoke of the burning scrub rose. The Sandringhams were seen to enter a small wood on the lower slopes of the Turkish position. They were not seen to leave. When the British line was re-established that evening, none of the Sandringham Company had returned. Captain Beck was missing. His officers were missing. Of the 250 men, some 122 were confirmed dead, wounded, or prisoner. The rest, more than 120, were unaccounted for. The official explanation, delivered to the family and to Queen Alexandra by the War Office, was that the Sandringhams had advanced too far, become isolated, and been killed to a man. Their bodies subsequently lost in the scrub fires that swept the Gallipoli hillsides in the days after the battle. The unofficial explanation, which circulated at Sandringham for 2 generations, was different. Men of the Norfolks, who had survived the battle, the veterans of the 163rd Brigade, told their families that they had seen the Sandringhams enter the wood and vanish as though into a cloud. The cloud was almost certainly smoke, but the story, in the way that stories about lost men always do, became something else. The Imperial War Graves Commission found the remains of most of the Sandringhams in 1919. They had been shot. Some had been bayoneted. The majority were identified only by buttons, paybooks, and fragments of regimental insignia. They were buried in the Asmack Cemetery on the Gallipoli Peninsula, where most of them remain. Queen Alexandra, who by 1915 was the Dowager Queen, asked the War Office for an accurate account of the company's last hour. She was given a summary that matched the official explanation. She was not told about the confused survivor testimony or the smoke. A private memorial service was held at St. Mary Magdalene. The church on the Sandringham estate acquired its bronze plaque. For the rest of her life, and Alexandra lived until 1925, she placed a wreath at the base of that plaque on the 12th of August every year. The men who had served the house were gone. The house went on. Sandringham had a talent for absorbing loss and continuing because it had been built to continue, because everything at Sandringham had been arranged by a prince who needed to go on weekend after weekend and year after year. The war took 122 men from its farms in a single afternoon. The house replaced them within a generation. The bronze plaque remembered them. The main building did not flinch, but the house that astonishes the Christmas photographers was not built by the princes whose names are carved on its archway. Their presence at Sandringham is documented, recorded in ink on paper in the estate office, where the Sandringham books have been kept in an unbroken series since 1862. Their stories are not. There was a gamekeeper called Henry Cresswell, who was headkeeper from 1902 to 1931, and who is recorded in the shoot books as having personally raised or supervised the raising of more than 750,000 pheasants over his career. We know he lived in Keeper's Cottage at Dersingham. We know he was paid £80 a year in 1910, rising to £180 in 1930. We know he trained his son to take over from him. We know nothing else. There was a stud groom called William Burroughs, who ran the royal stables at Sandringham for 22 years under Edward VII and George V, and who is named in George V's private diary 6 times, always in connection with a horse. We know he supervised the training of the Prince of Wales's private carriage horses. We know he was given a gold watch on his retirement. We know he died in 1932. We do not know where he is buried. There was a head gardener called Thomas Cook, who laid out the formal gardens at Sandringham between 1869 and 1883 under Alexandra's direction, and whose plans for the Rockery Garden and the Lower Stream Garden are still followed by the present team. He worked under 3 Princes of Wales and 2 Kings. His name appears in the gardener's accounts 47 times. His obituary in the Norfolk and Norwich Gazette ran to 4 lines. His grave is in the churchyard at Sandringham, unvisited. There were women. There were housemaids and laundrymaids and stillroom maids and kitchen girls and a head housekeeper called Mrs. Rogers, who served Alexandra from 1879 to 1908, and whose name appears in Alexandra's personal Christmas gift book every year for 29 years, always for the same gift, a pound of tea and a silk kerchief. We know nothing else about Mrs. Rogers. We do not know her first name. We do not know if she married. We do not know if she had children. We know that the Queen of England thought of her every Christmas for 3 decades. They appear in the records as footnotes, a name beside a sum, a quarterly wage entered into a bound ledger, and then they vanish into the silence that swallows everyone in a great house who is not a member of the family. We do not know their faces. We do not know where they slept, except in general, the maids in the servants' wing, the gamekeepers in cottages, the stockmen above the stables. We know only that they were there, that the house they served is still standing, and that their names survived, some of them because the Sandringham Estate Office kept its accounts with the bureaucratic thoroughness of a well-run English country house, and nobody threw the books away. Bertie shot 30,000 pheasants a year. Other men raised them, fed them, walked them to the drives, beat them from the cover, picked them up from the line. The house absorbed both. 3 kings had died inside Sandringham by 1952. The 4th great death the house would preside over was not a king. George VI came to Sandringham at Christmas 1951, a visibly dying man. He had had 1 lung removed in September 1951 for what was then still being described to the public as a small obstruction, which was in fact lung cancer. He had spent November at Buckingham Palace recovering. He insisted on coming to Sandringham for Christmas because Sandringham was what his family did at Christmas, and because one suspects he wanted to die in the house his father had died in. He did. On the 5th of February 1952, the king walked to the top of the long rise at the eastern end of the estate to watch a shooting party. He had a good day. That evening, he went to bed in the first floor bedroom, the same bedroom in which his father had died 16 years earlier, and sometime during the night, he died in his sleep of a coronary thrombosis. He was 56. His valet found him at 7:30 a.m. on the morning of February 6th, 1952. His 25-year-old daughter, Elizabeth, was in Kenya at a safari lodge when the news reached her. She flew home as queen. Elizabeth II did not like Sandringham. She went there every Christmas for 70 years because it was what her family did, and because she had been raised to do what her family did, and because the Sandringham Christmas, the walk to church, the gift exchange on Christmas Eve, the lunch of Norfolk turkey, the tree in the saloon, was one of the rituals of the Windsor House. But she preferred Balmoral. Balmoral was hers by choice. Sandringham had been her father's. The house changed around her. Her uncle, the former Edward VIII, had inherited the estate on his father's death in 1936 and had promptly sold it back to his brother, the new George VI, for about £300,000 on the grounds that he did not need it. Elizabeth herself, in 1952, inherited the house outright as a personal possession, not as crown property, but as her own. This distinction would become important. Sandringham belongs to the monarch in his or her private capacity. It cannot be taken by the crown. It passes by private will. And the Christmases continued. The Queen's grown children came, then grandchildren, then, after 1981, a new young princess who had married the heir. Diana's last Christmas at Sandringham was 1995. By then, her marriage to Charles had collapsed publicly. Her panorama interview had been broadcast, and the Queen had written to Charles and Diana in December 1995, asking them to divorce. Diana came to Sandringham anyway. She stayed for Christmas lunch. She left the following day. Biographers disagree about whether she was formally asked to leave or chose to leave. What is documented is that Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh, who had warned her in writing the previous year about the consequences of her media strategy, did not speak to her on Christmas Day. She returned to Kensington Palace. She would never come to Sandringham again. 2 summers later, on 31st August 1997, she died in Paris. The house has seen other modern darkness. In January 2019, at the age of 97, Prince Philip drove his Land Rover out of the estate, through a junction on the A149 and into the side of a Kia carrying a woman and a 9-month-old baby, breaking the woman's wrist. Philip was uninjured. He surrendered his driving license 3 weeks later. The incident ended his public life. In 2023, Prince Harry's memoir, Spare, revealed, among other things, that Philip had maintained at Sandringham a small personal fleet of Land Rovers, that the Christmas walk to church had been the scene of several of his most difficult conversations with his father, and that his mother's last happy Christmas, the 1995 Christmas, had, according to the staff he interviewed, been not happy at all. Sandringham received all of this. Sandringham said nothing. The current king, Charles III, took over the estate in 2022 on his mother's death. He has begun, quietly, the first significant changes Sandringham has seen since 1870. Organic farming has replaced some of the shooting. Pheasant numbers have been reduced. The formal gardens have been opened more widely to the public. Charles has always loved Sandringham more than his mother did. He intends, according to people close to him, to die there. He will not be the first. Stand at the east front of Sandringham on a December afternoon. Stand at the east front of Sandringham on a December afternoon, with the low sun behind the chimneys and the rooks going home to the park, and you see what 4 generations of royal photographers have seen. A silhouette of gables, a procession of turrets, a neat red brick horizon that looks as though it belongs to a 19th century storybook. But look closer, and the picture complicates. The house is only 60 years older than Buckingham Palace's present facade. The chimneys are cosmetic, half of them ventilating shafts added in the 1970s. The formal gardens are 20th century reconstructions of what Alexandra would have recognised but did not build. The church is older than the house by 500 years. The bronze plaque on the church wall commemorates men whose bodies are buried in Turkey. The whole building is an act of curated memory. A Norfolk country house, wearing the costume of a royal palace, kept in its dressing by a household that has learned, through 4 long reigns, how to manage the difference between what the house contains and what the house admits. Sandringham is not one house. It is the record, in brick, of what the House of Windsor cannot fit inside the official story of itself. Bertie needed a house where he could be a bad son. He built Sandringham. George V needed a house where his youngest son could be invisible. Wood Farm absorbed John and held him until he died. George V himself needed a death that would be reported in the morning papers, and Sandringham supplied one through the injection of a fashionable doctor who knew what the press wanted. George VI needed a house in which to stop being king without having to admit he was dying. Sandringham allowed it. Elizabeth II needed a Christmas ritual she had not chosen but could not abandon, and Sandringham hosted 70 of them. Diana needed a house that would let her leave gracefully. Sandringham refused. The house gave them all what they asked of it, in the careful, expensive, neutral manner of a great country house accustomed to absorbing human weather. The house always gives. That is its genius, and that is its cost. Because what Sandringham has also always preserved, in its shoot books, in its gamekeepers' cottages, in its estate accounts, is the names of the Henry Cresswells and the Mrs. Rogerses and the Sandringham Company. The royal family kept its pains in the big house. The servants kept the house running while they did. 4 generations later, the royal family are remembered in the morning paper. The servants are remembered in a ledger nobody reads. Sandringham asked the same question that all great houses ask. Who does a building belong to? The 21-year-old prince who bought it from a bankrupt baronet to escape his mother, the Edwardian mistresses who warmed their hands at its fires, the king whose death was engineered at a useful hour by his own physician, the 14-year-old prince who spent half his short life on a working farm 2 miles away because his family could not bear his seizures in the drawing room, the 250 gamekeepers and grooms who left the estate in August 1914 for a Turkish valley and did not come home, the photographers who still gather at the church gate every Christmas day, or the flat Norfolk land itself, the Wash, the Saltings, the ancient Carr woodland that was here long before a Prince of Wales was ever granted a Duchy of Cornwall, and will be here long after the last Land Rover has been driven through the park. Sandringham does not answer. The house never answers. It simply stands, red brick and white stone and quiet, at the centre of its flat county, and lets you decide. And on the north wall of its church, cut into bronze in 1919, the names of the Sandringham Company still run in rows, and the wreath that Queen Alexandra laid every August for 10 years until her death is still, on the 12th of August each year, quietly replaced. They are still down there. They always will be. If this story moved you, challenged you, or made you see a building differently, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment telling me which estate, dynasty, or hidden history we should investigate next. There are hundreds of these stories waiting to be told, and every one of them is hiding something beneath the surface.